thanks everyone for joining us for our Agile takes. We take, I don't know, a couple minutes to talk about some of the great things going on in cybersecurity. And more importantly, we talk to experts who are on the front fighting, fighting the bad guys and being the outsourced cybersecurity consultants and team for their customers. So joining me today, and I'm thrilled to do this because Scott's been a customer of ours and I have not had a chance to talk too much to Scott. So Scott Randall is CEO of Advanced Legal out of Las Vegas, Nevada. Scott, thanks for joining us. We appreciate you spending a few minutes.
Thank you so much for the opportunity and the time. We appreciate it as well.
Absolutely. So you guys come at things a little bit different way. So a lot of our customers and partners are dealing with healthcare providers and people who take credit cards. So there's a financial transaction or banks themselves. When you look at Advanced Legal, you're working with the guys who have all the detailed confidential information on all of our businesses, right? They got it all. And, we've worked with a lot of law firms in the past, and it's funny, you're talking about some of the smartest people and the most diligent people, but sometimes they don't like spending a lot of money on IT. So you probably see this, you see this a lot. So with the vast repositories of data and access to the most confidential information, you think about the target that law firms have on their back. How do you put that into perspective? How do you go into putting together plans and ideas on how you're going to, help them, build a defense from the people looking to take that data?
Well, it's challenging, right? And I think you raised the point. With law firms, most of them are pretty small businesses. I mean, if you think about it, even a large law firm is still probably much smaller than many of the corporations out there that are being targeted. And the first step is really to get them to understand that they're being targeted and specifically why. And if you think about it, to the point that you made with all of the information, law firms have an amazing amount of sensitive information on businesses and individuals, right? And so that information, if it is exposed, ultimately could change the outcome of a lawsuit, right? I mean, it's highly sensitive. It's also governed by strict legal requirements, ethical requirements, right? And so attorney-client privilege is no joke, and it needs to remain in place, right? So you have to talk through with the attorneys kind of the information they're storing, and it's more of an eye-opener to walk them through all of the sensitive data and what if it was exposed and what if it was breached. And then you take it from there into things like their client trust account, right? So attorneys hold in trust large sums of money on behalf of their clients, and all of that is being governed by some pretty strict ethical requirements. And what would happen if somebody gained access to that? And so it's really an educational process, to walk through with them and kind of just go down the list of all of the stuff that they're storing. Because I think when you do something for long enough, you kind of lose sight of not the importance of it, but how critical it is. And it's not until the data is gone through an encryption event or it's been taken through some kind of data breach that it's all of a sudden oh my gosh, well, this can't happen.
Right. Well, it's funny you bring that up. There's a lot of mergers and acquisitions. M&A is going through the charts right now, right? Especially in choppy economies, M&A, tends to boom as well. And you're right. There's a lot of data there that attorneys have that could potentially, mess up a deal right in the process. Number two, you mentioned those IOTA accounts that they have. The Wall Street Journal did an article on that, on how that is just huge prey. You got big sums of money, like you just said, sitting in some account, and maybe not everybody's got their eye on it because that's not their foremost piece of business, right? That's not the number one thing they do, like a bank, so to speak. So, No, you're absolutely right. So what do you see as some of the top three things that some of these firms need to be very mindful of?
That is a really good question. And so I think education is really key, right? Above all else, right? And cybersecurity, it's a layered approach, right? So as well as I do that it's not any one thing, right, that creates a secure environment. It's matters of security and levels of security. And so the biggest thing that getting across first is an understanding that it's not any one thing, right? It used to be nope, I've got my antivirus malware, I'm good, and now I've got my email spam filtering, we're good to go. And That maybe was the case back in the day, but things have changed dramatically since then. And education is the first part of that, really getting them to understand that that's not the case. If you look at some of the things that are probably the biggest missed, user education, like, is huge, right? And that's not technical per se, but if you do not have some kind of ongoing recurring cybersecurity, to your point of like the trust counts or the IOLTA accounts, there have been instances where like a threat actor will come in to M365, breach an insecure password without MFA in place, and then they'll go through and they'll change the Outlook credentials so that all inbound messages go into deleted, and all of a sudden they're sending email as the partner to like the accounting department where it's like, hey, we need to distribute funds, here's the routing information, right? And that looks legit because it's coming from the person's email because someone breached it, right? Antivirus isn't going to fix that. Malware is not going to fix that, right? But that is a serious threat. So like education is the first part, because if you're sitting in the accounting department, you want to be very clear that even if it looks like a legitimate email, like, how do I know that it is? Like, it doesn't seem like this person would normally communicate in this fashion. Like, that's a trigger, but like, there's the whole education. And then on top of that, the one that gets missed still even today is multi-factor. Like, attorneys are like creatures of habit, just like the rest of us. And they're like, I don't want to have to remember one more thing, or I don't want to be slowed down. So explaining to them that, I mean, that is a huge step forward. And then there's some basics, right? And this is nothing new to you or me, and probably most of them, but like your patch management. If you don't keep your patches up to date, right, then you are basically leaving your door unlocked, right, as new things are being discovered. And finally, the whole backup approach, right? It used to be like, I've got my backups, we're good to go, but that's no longer good enough, right? They need to be encrypted, offsite, air-gapped, so that they're not on the system, so that if somebody gets in, they're not encrypted or taken or destroyed.
That's right.
So those are some of the big top misses. I mean, but there's so many different layers, right? Sure. And I think that what Agile Blue is doing, which is great, is it's that proactive step, right? Because I don't know the current stats, and I know you probably do, but it used to be that a threat actor would come into your system about 2 weeks or so in advance of actually doing an attack, and they're staging it and they're getting it ready. And I think that time frame has shrunk to somewhere around 5 days right at the moment. I think, again, you would know better than I. But that is the moment at which someone is in your system, and if you're a law firm, they may not even want to encrypt you. That may be like the after the fact goal, but they're busy stealing your data, right? It's data that's important. And that is where Agile Blue, with like that proactive monitoring and like, hey, things are not looking good, or M365, hey, somebody's trying to access your account. That's a critical step in the overall security. Yep. And I think that beyond that, what's coming, and it's probably still for lawyers, law firms, at least a year and a half away, is this concept of zero trust, right? I think that is the next thing that is coming after SOC as a service.
That's right. No, I mean, you're absolutely right. And what's funny is it's no one ever wants to pay for defense, it seems, right? Because it's not out there, you can't see it, but it is so important. Now, you bring up a great point. You know, your other point that I want to press upon before we wrap up today, you're right. Some of these hackers are not just encrypting your data and then selling it back. They are waiting it out. They are gathering that data. And you're right, at the end, they might decide to encrypt it just to be, kind of jerks, because that's what they are at the end of the day. They're capitalists, but they're jerks too sometimes, these hackers. But it's now less than 50%. In fact, I'm president of InfraGard, and the FBI was telling us the other day, what they've seen thus far in this first 6 months of 2022, it's less than 40% now of the folks who pay the ransomware are getting their data back. It used to be 60%, then it dropped to about 50 some. They're now on 40. So meaning they're encrypting your data. Then people are paying and they're still not getting their data back. Like, that's pretty scary.
Absolutely. No, that's crazy that it's down to 40%. I knew it was dropping. I didn't know how quickly it was dropping. The other thing that I've heard, and I don't know whether there's truth to this, right? I think there is, but I don't have the stat behind it, is that for those that actually pay the ransom, within 6 months to 9 months later, lots of times they're hacked again or encrypted again, right?
You just think it can't happen again.
Yeah.
Well, that's the easy target right there.
Absolutely. And the best way to prevent it is exactly what Agile Blue is doing, which is like before that event actually happens, you are aware of like who is coming into the system,
Right.
all of the unusual anomalies, things that like in and of themselves are not like indicative, like there's something wrong, but you put them together and it's like something is going on and something bad is about to happen.
That's right. Scott, this has been excellent. Any final words? And then please let everybody know where they can find you on the web.
Sure, absolutely. I think the final take is like, thank you so much for what you and your team are doing, right? Like, I know that SOC as a service is not industry standard yet, but I know that it's going to be. And I think that it's things like Agile takes that ultimately create the education that will help move people along and understanding what really is needed.
Yeah, thanks for that, Scott. And your website?
Yeah, it's www.advanced with the D legal, so advancedlegal.com.
Thank you so much for doing this. The advice was fantastic. And Black Hat's coming up in about a month, and I look forward to seeing you out in Vegas.
Sounds good. Looking forward to seeing you as well.